Good people YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and I used to think of, and still do, think about, which watch I would choose if I had to stick with only one time only watch. And I used to think, one of my Grand Seikos because they're absolutely gorgeous, or the Rolex Explorer just because that's like pretty much like in my mind like the one watch kind of collection watch. But then I wore the Aqua Terra again after a long time, and yeah, I now think that this Aqua Terra, or pretty much any of them, is the one that I would stick with for the rest of my life, way over an Explorer. So yeah, it's been a while since I last wore an Aqua Terra, and it's always struck me as a super handsome watch, but seeing it again, I mean, I was absolutely floored by just how well executed and how just so good, and just this oozing goodness, that dial is. And it's so much better than I remember it, and I just cannot get enough of it. So in this video, I'm gonna get into why I think the Aqua Terra is better than the equivalent Rolexes, and that, mainly comes down to the design, movement, and that absolutely just spectacular dial. But there is one pretty big way that Rolex just destroys this and pretty much all other Omegas. Also, at the end of the video, I have a last call for the Artem straps giveaway winners that haven't responded to my reply. So yeah, check that out, and also some more info on my next giveaway. So yeah, good stuff. Let's get into it. So let's do the dimensions first, as always, and it's what I would consider to be like the sweetest of sweet spots for me, because the case is 38.6 millimeters, and on the wrist it truly wears like a 38 millimeter watch, while still maintaining a really good amount of wrist presence because of that dial, which I will definitely be getting into because it's just so good. Next section. But the size is also helped by the lug-to-lug of 45.3 millimeters, which is very compact, but the lugs are so sculpted and striking that the watch manages, like I said, to have good wrist presence, and it can pretty much work on any wrist size out there, to be honest. Also, the thickness is 12.9 millimeters, which might sound, a little bit more than what you would expect from a time-only watch. But, from the sides, it doesn't look very tall because of the mid case, has that wonderful bit of brushing and the big bevel running along the top. But more importantly, it has the Calibre 8500 movement, which includes an independent jumping hour hand for traveling, which is just incredible. So usually 2 millimeters of taper, isn't enough for me, but here it just works kind of. And I think that has to do with the proportions of the mid link versus the outer links, in that they don't look particularly wide overall, nor do they look, very narrow overall. And I have a lot to say about the 19 millimeter lug width, and yeah, but that's just gonna be for later on. So it's been a couple of years since I've seen this watch, and the first thing that struck me right now, and pretty much every single time I see this watch, is just how well finished and how subtly intricate the dial is. I mean, like from far away, you can't really tell that anything's really going on, but when you look at it closer, it just looks, oh, so good. And a lot of that comes down to the indices, because they are 3D and sloped, which isn't something that we often see, and it looks even better than the regular rectangular 3D indices, which are also still really awesome to see, like on the Rolex OP36. But these are just, more awesome. And, I can't tell you how good these indices look here. So yeah, here's the macro, and I just love how they, how many angles and facets there are, because they're not only triangular, they're sloped, and they're kind of cut in the middle where the lume is, and the lume itself is dipping at the edges, in the indices. So that just adds, oh god. Oh, and the top is brushed and the sides are polished, and the front facet closest to the center is angled as well and polished. So yeah, I mean, you can have pretty much light reflecting from any angle, and that front angled bevel is just such a thoughtful detail. Honestly, these are the best shaped indices I've ever seen. I mean, obviously Grand Seiko indices are, next level special in their own way. But, as far as Swiss watches go, and especially at this price point, and even more than that, I mean, for that matter, I mean, God, you're getting a mega value. And also another thing is that the Omega logo is applied and brushed, just to be the cherry on top. Okay, now moving on from those awesome indices, we've got a muted dark blue sunburst dial that has engraved vertical lines, and this has a kind of subtle effect that I happen to like a lot because it just makes the dial that much more special than other sunburst dials that we see so commonly on other watches. And while we're at it, I want to mention the hands because they're multifaceted hands. The hour, minute, and second hand, but the hour and minute hands are polished on the sides with a little angle, and the center is brushed. And that coupled with the polished surfaces, it just comes together in a way that very few other watches can achieve, and that no Rolex has achieved before, that's for sure. And seeing the whole thing outside with lots of light just overloads the senses because you're seeing all these little reflections all over the place, and you're getting shadows from those insane indices, and you're seeing those brushed finishes move around the sun. And now on to the movement, which is an absolute gem, not only because it's anti-magnetic and coaxial, both great features, and I'll also get into the finishing of the movement in a second, but this one is one of the very few time-only watches on the market that have a jumping hour hand. So basically this is a GMT without being a GMT, which can be great for someone who wants a more streamlined look. And I just happen to love the look of the fourth GMT hand and also the bezels that they usually come with, but nothing can really compete with the overall simplicity and purity of just a three-hander. And onto the physical movement itself, and while filming this I realized that I haven't made a video on a watch with an exhibition case back in quite some time, so it was really nice to see a movement. And Omega did so well with the finishing, because it's not the regular Côte de Genève finishing that you see on the vast majority of watches out there, but rather it's this arabesque swirling sunburst Côte de Genève finish, I was about to say, which I haven't seen on any other watch. And it's just so nice being able to see such a beautiful movement, because when you're spending this kind of money, it's nice to see something special and unique looking. But it's not just a pretty movement because it's the master coaxial chronometer, so it's going to be super accurate, and because it's a coaxial escapement, the friction is going to be greatly reduced, which means longer service intervals, which is always great. And on top of that, the silicone hairspring makes it anti-magnetic, and this particular one has 60 hours power reserve because it's got 2 barrels, and that's all in a watch that's cased up to be 12.9 millimeters. Tudor, let's do better. I know you can do it. And as for Rolex, they make incredible movements, there's no denying that, but the practical advantages that this Omega Calibre 8500 offers is just immense. And so the case design on the Aqua Terra is classic Omega, and classic Omega is exactly what I love seeing and what I miss so much about my Seamaster Professional 300 and my X33. I mean, there's just something about the brush finish on Omegas that looks so special, and I can't quite put it to words, but I feel like I can recognize an Omega brush surface, from a sea of, regular brush surfaces, from other brands. So yeah, maybe a blind test is in order. On the top edge of the case, we have a big contrasting bevel running through, and like I've said so many times before, I absolutely love seeing this detail in any watch, and that bevel leads into those classic twisted lyre lugs that I love looking at, especially when it's on straps, because the contrast between the strap and the metal just draws your eyes towards those swooping lugs even more. And that's why I prefer wearing my Speedmaster on straps, because of those lugs. And that's obviously not to say that Rolex is garbage because their case design isn't as interesting. They're just a different kind of brand offering different kind of experience. But for someone like me who just loves looking at their watches and gets excited by the tiny details, I look at Omegas and I can't get over how good it all looks, with the curves and the contrasting finishes. And that's just something that would just keep me going day after day, and and would bring me back to the watch after not wearing it for a while. And I think that counts for a lot when it comes to buying a watch. So I've worn this Aqua Terra bracelet before, and it's great and comfy and way better than my Speedmaster bracelet, because it's actually fluid and it doesn't wear like a cuff. Also, I would prefer it if the mid links were brushed. It would have been absolutely perfect if it had the fully brushed Railmaster bracelet, but in general I like the Omega flat link design a lot, and in terms of design I prefer this over the Oyster bracelet. And I was so close to just saying that it's all good overall, but everything just came crashing down right at the end because when I was taking off the bracelet to try it on my wrist, and with other straps, I was really excited about that. I noticed that it had a 19mm lug width. And yeah, I mean, I can't, begin to describe how disappointed I was when I found this out, because I wanted to try it out on a bunch of different straps, but I had to stick with my one Omega NATO that I got free with one of my purchases. This easily could have been such a strap monster, especially because it can easily be dressed up and dressed down. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, but it's not the end of the world though, just because the bracelet is comfortable and it does look good at least. But this is where Omega falls short of the Rolex, because as good as Omega bracelets can be, for me, nothing can get close to a Rolex Oyster bracelet. I mean, the main thing I miss about my Explorer 2 is how it felt on my wrist because of that Oyster bracelet, and that's why I want to get a Rolex again, because of that insane comfort. And comfort for me is one of the most important, things about a watch, and wearing it long term for that matter. Also, the difference between clasps is, huge. Here we have an elevated butterfly clasp because, one side is friction fit and the other side locks it all down. But compared to even the base level clasp on an Oyster Perpetual, like I showed in a couple videos ago, I mean, it's just so far behind. I mean, Rolex really has refined the clasp to the next level, because the experience of just taking off the watch and putting it on is so pleasant, with no chances of it flying off, when taking it out, and just when you're closing it, it just feels so secure. But, I will admit, if I'm not comparing the Aqua Terra to a Rolex, I wouldn't have really any issues with the bracelet other than, I wish it was brushed, and obviously I would wish that the 19mm lug width is 20. But like I said, it's irritating, but not the end of the world. Okay, so there you have it, and now on to the Artem strap giveaway announcements. Two people have claimed their straps, but Manny Fernandez, if you're watching this, check out the reply to your original comment, because I won't be able to hold this strap much longer and I'll have to move on to the next person. So yeah, I have another giveaway for all of you who didn't win, or actually might actually win this one again. But yeah, it's the next giveaway is coming up on the 27th of this month, Thanksgiving weekend. So yeah, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and yeah, just so you know what's going on at any moment. And yeah, until the next video, good day.